Welcome to Godless and Grounded. There is a fine line between belief and absurdity. In a world full of diverse faiths and ideas, some beliefs may stretch reason so far that they become hard to take seriously. Today, we look at 10 beliefs in Hinduism that, from a rational or skeptical perspective, appear deeply problematic. The aim is not to attack people, but to test ideas by reason and evidence. You may find some of these more striking than others. Let us begin. One of the most famous claims in Hinduism is reincarnation. The idea that when you die, your soul is born into another body, human or animal, based on your deeds. If you believe reincarnation, you must accept that a person now could have been a tree, a worm, or a bird before. But this raises many questions. If your past life was a dog, how do you remember it? If your past life was a worm, how could you have thoughts or moral agency? If memory does not carry over, then what is the point? The doctrine becomes merely symbolic, but then many believers insist on it as literal truth. There is no scientifically measurable evidence for consciousness jumping between bodies across lifetimes. Consciousness seems to depend on the brain, on neural networks. When the brain dies, the system ceases to function. Without evidence, reincarnation is a leap of faith that demands credulity. Second, the caste system, often tied to Hindu ideas of karma, states that one is born into a fixed social order based on past deeds. You are born into your caste for reasons you cannot control, and changing caste is nearly impossible in many traditional contexts. This rigid social hierarchy claims divine sanction. But social justice, equality, and human dignity all resist such a view. Many Hindus reject caste discrimination today, but believing that birth dictates your fate is deeply unjust. If your status in life depends entirely on acts you performed before birth, when you had no control or memory, then how can this be fair? It is a moral absurdity to punish someone eternally, or for many lives for something they could not influence. Third, belief in a supreme cosmic being or beings who intervene based on worship, such as gods who grant miracles or punish sins, is common in Hindu traditions. But how do we decide which gods are real and which acts they actually perform? There are thousands of Hindu deities, many overlapping in roles. If you pray to one god for wealth, another for health, and another for wisdom, are they all real? If gods intervene, why is suffering so rampant? Why do disasters strike good people? If we accept selective intervention, we also accept arbitrariness or caprice in the divine. That seems more superstition than reason. Fourth, some Hindus believe in karma as a cosmic accountant who tracks every action, intention, thought, across lifetimes down to minute detail. You must experience consequences exactly proportionate to your deeds, eventually in succeeding incarnations. But if karma is flawless, then how do we explain seemingly random events? Plane crashes, earthquakes, genetic defects, disease in newborns. If a baby is born autistic or blind, did it commit bad deeds in past lives? That idea borders on cruelty. The system tends to blame victims. If you suffer, you must deserve it from prior lives. This is dangerous thinking, since it discourages empathy or caring. And if there is a divine agency managing all this bookkeeping, why not show clear evidence? Fifth, the belief that certain animals are sacred, especially cows, is deeply embedded in many Hindu communities. Many treat cows as divine or untouchable. But why a cow and not a horse, or a camel, or a dog? Why do we elevate one species over others? This favoritism often leads to legal protections for cows and bans on beef in many areas. But what about the welfare of other animals? Why is cruelty to a dog less terrible, or allowed, than harming a cow? If moral respect for life is the reason, then all animals deserve equal protection, not selective veneration. Elevating cows while tolerating cruelty to other creatures seems arbitrary. Sixth, the idea that chanting or reciting particular words or mantras holds magical or mystical power. For example, repeating a certain syllable 1,000 times can ward off illness or bring wealth. But is there any testable effect? If a mantra really had power, then it should work reliably, and we could isolate the mechanism. Yet in controlled trials, chanting shows only placebo effects, or psychological comfort. That is fine as a kind of meditation or focusing tool. but to treat it as magical is to leap into superstition. 7th, belief in astral planes, invisible worlds, subtle bodies, energy flows, prana, chakras, kundalini, is common in many Hindu and Neo-Hindu teachings. The idea is that there is a spiritual body besides the physical body, and energy centers that must be balanced. But again, where is the evidence? No observable instrument can detect these energy vortices or subtle bodies. When a person allegedly awakens kundalini, this is entirely subjective, anecdotal, or explained by neurological or psychological phenomena, hallucinations, ecstatic trances. To accept this as metaphysical fact is to ignore the standards of inquiry we use everywhere else, in science, medicine, engineering. 8th, belief in many religious purifications, rules, and taboos. For example, fate of touching a menstruating woman, or impurity after childbirth, or dietary taboos. In many traditions, a menstruating woman is considered impure and forbidden from temples or certain rituals. This shows how superstition and social control combine. These rules often have no rational basis. They can even cause harm. If a woman is impure during menstruation, what kind of deity would demand that? In modern times, such rules serve mainly to exclude and shame. Rational ethics asks, why punish someone for a natural bodily function? There is no consistent logic behind many of these taboos. They are social constructions masked as divine law. 9th, the belief that texts like the Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, epics such as Ramayana and Mahabharata have been revealed and are infallible or beyond question. If you treat them as beyond criticism, then you give up reason. Yet the texts contain contradictions, mythical content, supernatural events, lessons inconsistent with modern moral reasoning. How do you reconcile thousands of gods, many versions of stories, internal inconsistencies? If religious texts are infallible, why do people disagree about their meaning, translation, or which version is true? Any sacred text that commands belief without the possibility of questioning is demanding you surrender your mind. That is a red flag. A religion that encourages doubt, reinterpretation, and debate is stronger than one demanding blind faith. 10th, belief in a final liberation or moksha that ends all rebirths, often achieved by devotion, knowledge, or ritual. The belief claims that the individual soul merges with cosmic reality or remains in bliss forever. But this raises a host of philosophical problems. If at the end your identity dissolves into a universal oneness, then what is it that merges? If you lose individuality, are you truly you anymore? If your consciousness persists, in what sense? If there is no personal self, then why desire continuation at all? Moreover, if liberation is the highest goal, why is this world full of suffering and injustice? If a supreme God is behind all this, why set up a system where most souls never achieve liberation? In effect, this looks like a cruel lottery. Believing such an eternal goal without evidence is speculative and metaphysical. These 10 beliefs illustrate how faith in elaborate supernatural systems can clash with reason. Beliefs about reincarnation, karma, mystical energies, divine intervention, purity rules, sacred animals, scripture infallibility, and ultimate liberation all rest on assertions that are extremely hard to test, verify, or justify in a consistent way. For believers, these ideas may provide comfort, meaning, community, identity, and moral frameworks. But from a skeptical point of view, they demand extraordinary evidence, which is not supplied. Let us look now at real-life examples and challenges to some of these beliefs. Many poor people remain poor, regardless of prayer or religious merit. Disease strikes in spite of prayers. Natural disasters do not distinguish devotees from non-devotees. If gods selectively answer prayers, why not rid the world of congenital diseases, famine, war? If karma is perfect, then victims of crimes or disasters must have somehow caused their fate in earlier lives. A horrible conclusion that makes empathy harder. In social terms, caste discrimination justified by divine will has oppressed billions across generations. When supernatural claims multiply, dozens or hundreds of gods, complex invisible systems, multiple realms, Skepticism demands that we treat them as speculative stories unless good reasons appear. In everyday life, we accept only those unobservable claims that come with strong, independent evidence. For example, in science, we posit things we cannot see, neutrinos, subatomic particles, but only when experiments demand them and measure them. But in religion, often claims are made first and only later, if ever, are they tested. That reverses the burden of proof. Critics may argue that these beliefs are symbolic or allegorical, that many Hindus do not take them literally, that they serve cultural, psychological, spiritual roles rather than factual descriptions. That may be true in many cases. But the problem is when believers do insist on literal truth. If your belief is purely metaphorical, then it is open to interpretation and debate. But when someone says reincarnation really happens, or karma really measures your acts across lifetimes, they must provide evidence, and they do not. Let us now look closer at how some of these beliefs work in real life, and why they lead to contradictions when viewed through reason. Take the belief in reincarnation again. It sounds poetic, the idea that life never truly ends, that we get another chance. But if we look at the numbers, the logic breaks down. The world's human population has grown massively over thousands of years. If souls are simply recycled, where do the extra souls come from? Did rocks or plants suddenly start producing new souls to keep up with population growth? If the universe has a fixed number of souls, we should see a constant population. The idea that billions of new souls appear out of nowhere makes reincarnation not a closed, measurable system, but a story told to comfort fear of death. And if you were once a rat and now are a human, what part of you continues? Not memory, not personality, not DNA. So what is left? A word, soul, without evidence or definition, without memory or identity. Saying you were a rat is meaningless. Now about karma, the belief that moral justice is built into the fabric of the cosmos. On the surface, it feels attractive. We want fairness. We want to believe every good act is rewarded and every bad act punished. But karma turns suffering into blame. If a child is born poor, disabled, or into abuse, believers may say, it is his karma. Instead of compassion, the system gives justification for inequality. This is not moral evolution, it is moral paralysis. Even worse, when people are told not to help those who suffer because their misery is due to past life deeds, the system becomes cruel. It discourages social reform and makes injustice appear sacred. That is why many social reformers in Indian history, including B.R. Ambedkar, criticized caste and karma as tools of oppression rather than wisdom. Now consider the caste system, a hierarchy said to come from the divine body of the god Purusha, dividing people into four main groups: priests, warriors, traders, and laborers. Below them, the so-called untouchables. For centuries, this belief has justified discrimination, segregation, and humiliation. It has decided what people could eat, marry, touch, or even dream of becoming. If someone is told they are low-born because of what they did in a previous life, it makes rebellion against inequality almost impossible. This belief chain, that past life karma fixes present status, has enslaved minds as effectively as chains on hands. And even today, in modern India, caste identity still shapes marriage, politics, and opportunity. A divine hierarchy is perhaps the most efficient way to make oppression look holy. Next comes the worship of countless gods: Vishnu, Shiva, Lakshmi, Ganesha, Hanuman, Kali, Durga, and thousands more. Every god has myths, desires, temper, and stories full of contradictions. Some gods drink alcohol, others fight each other, others demand sacrifices. If you look at it closely, Hindu mythology reads more like an ancient fantasy series than divine truth. If multiple gods rule the same world, how do they coordinate justice? If one grants wealth and another takes it away, who is in charge? And if they are beyond human flaw, why do their stories include jealousy, anger, revenge, even deceit? When the divine behaves worse than the average human, what moral example does that set? Another famous belief is in astrology. Many Hindus plan marriages, careers, and daily decisions according to the positions of planets. but planets are rocks and gas spheres moving in predictable orbits. How can Mars or Jupiter decide your personality or marriage fate? A person born in the same minute as you but in another country has a completely different life. The sky does not tailor fate for each person. Yet entire rituals and family decisions are built on these cosmic guesses. If astrology worked, identical twins should have identical lives. They do not. If astrology worked, rich astrologers would always win lotteries. They do not. If astrology worked, people could forecast disasters precisely. They cannot. That alone should tell us the belief is based on pattern seeking rather than evidence. The ritual purity system is another strange set of beliefs. It teaches that touching certain people, eating certain foods, or being around certain bodily fluids makes you impure. The idea that normal biological functions are dirty is ancient but absurd. Women during menstruation are banned from entering temples or kitchens in many places, as if divine beings are offended by blood, which is the very essence of life. In reality, such rules were invented to control women's mobility and participation. There is no logic that an all-powerful God would be disturbed by biology. Religion here functions as social engineering disguised as holiness. Another idea is idol worship. That a God who created billions of galaxies somehow resides in a clay statue and accepts offerings of flowers, sweets, or milk. People pour liters of milk on stone idols while poor children nearby starve. If the divine actually wanted devotion, would it not prefer feeding a hungry person over bathing a rock in milk? When a belief system teaches ritual over compassion, it loses its moral compass. Real spirituality, if it exists, should uplift the living, not decorate stone. Belief in holy rivers like the Ganges being purifying is also common. Millions bathe in it each year to cleanse sins. Yet the same river is polluted with industrial waste, sewage, and corpses. Faith insists it remains pure, regardless. But science shows the bacteria count in many parts of the Ganges is dangerously high. You cannot wash off moral guilt with dirty water. It is the same as trying to cure a disease with denial. Then comes superstition and miracle stories. People believe certain temples can heal diseases, that touching a saint's feet can erase karma, that snakes drink milk during religious festivals. These events have been filmed and debunked repeatedly. The miracle of snakes drinking milk is simply animal behavior. Snakes flick their tongues at liquid to test it, not to drink it. Yet each year, millions still repeat the ritual. It shows how faith can override common sense. There is also the story of Hanuman flying across the ocean carrying a mountain, or Krishna lifting a hill on his finger, or Rama shooting arrows that explode like missiles. Believers claim these are literal histories, sometimes even saying ancient Hindus had airplanes or nuclear weapons. These are fantasy tales, not evidence of lost technology. Claiming myth as history insults actual science and archaeology. If such weapons existed, why is there no trace of them in ruins, no tools, no written blueprints? We find stone tools, pottery, iron smelting, but no sign of laser-guided divine missiles. Yet these stories are still told as proof that ancient Hindus were more advanced than modern science. Pride replaces reason. In practice, this belief turns life into an exam. Every moment is a test for the next life, or for escape from all lives. Instead of living fully, people worry about earning cosmic grades. A rational view would be simpler. We get one life, so live it well, with empathy and reason, not fear of cosmic punishment. It is also worth noting that many of these beliefs contradict each other. If God is all-powerful, why does karma operate independently? If karma decides fate, why pray at all? If moksha ends the cycle, why does God create new souls each day? The system folds under its own weight of contradictions. Religion thrives where questioning is silenced. But the moment you ask simple questions, the absurdity appears. How can a snake god drink milk? Why should a menstruating woman be impure? Why would a loving God assign you a lower caste before birth? Why would an all-knowing deity need you to ring bells, burn incense, and repeat chants just to hear you? Each belief, when stripped of reverence, collapses into human-made myth, written by people in ancient times trying to explain the unknown. They looked at stars and saw gods. They saw disease and blamed karma. They saw rivers and called them holy. In their time, it made sense. But clinging to those explanations now, in the 21st century, is like insisting the earth is flat because our ancestors thought so. A mature civilization learns to honor its heritage without being trapped by it. You can appreciate art, poetry, or cultural traditions of Hinduism without believing in divine monkeys or reincarnated kings. The problem begins when mythology is mistaken for truth, and stories are sold as science. Reason asks for one thing: evidence, and faith often provides stories instead. The purpose of such discussion is not mockery. It is liberation from ideas that limit our understanding of reality. Human progress has always come from questioning what once seemed sacred, whether it was the motion of planets, the causes of disease, or the nature of morality. If the goal of religion is truth, then truth should survive inquiry. If the goal is control, then it fears questions. Hinduism, like every religion, deserves both respect and scrutiny, not blind belief. So when you hear someone say that pouring milk on a statue will bless your business, or that a child's illness is punishment from a past life, or that being born poor is divine justice, ask them, where is the evidence? Where is the logic? Because faith without reason is only tradition wearing the mask of truth. And perhaps that is the greatest absurdity of all: believing that belief itself can make something true.